Seeing that it is 7 o'clock, we'll call this evening's April 10th, 2018 meeting of the Noblesville Common Council to order. Would you all please rise and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance? Mr. Taylor, would you lead us? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, would you call the roll?
Mr. Ayer?
Present.
Mr. Boyce?
Present.
Mr. Hampton?
Present.
Mr. Johnson?
Here.
Mr. O'Connor?
Here.
Ms. Rowland? Present. Mr. Taylor?
Present.
Ms. Wiles?
Present.
Mr. Jensen?
Present.
Mr. President, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Moving right along, we will look ahead to the approval of the minutes with the plan. First of all, the Plan Commission joint work session from March 27th, 2018. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Second. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Approved.
Abstain.
7 and with 1 abstention. I'm sorry, 8 and 1 abstention. Next up is the approval of the minutes from the March 27th, 2018 Common Council meeting. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Oh, no, I was absent for that one.
8 and
I was
1.
absent for that
Okay,
one.
8 approved and 1 abstention. Now moving on to the approval of tonight's agenda. Mr. Boyce, do you have a motion?
Yes, I would like to make a motion for proposed development presentation number 1 to be postponed till May 15th, and the rest of the agenda be approved as posted.
Motion to approve as amended. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Abstain.
9 to 0 to 1 abstention from tonight's agenda. 8 to 0 to 1 abstention. All right, moving on. Petitions or comments by citizens who are present. Seeing none, we will move forward to the mayor's report to council. Mr. Mayor, good evening.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, members of council. We had a great session over there about downtown, and the reason for maybe a couple of us being a few minutes late or seconds late. We had a legislative wrap-up from AIM, that's Accelerate Indiana Municipalities. I think you know that, used formerly IAC, that represent us and other municipalities to the state, and I think they really have done a good job for us. Many of you were at, and we want to celebrate the Brewburger open house and ribbon cutting. Terry and I ate there on Friday at noon as well, and was busy, and I think another birthday boy and his bride, Mr. Johnson, sorry, Roy, celebrated their birthday there last night, and he told me it was crowded. So just a great, again, amenity to have in downtown Noblesville. This morning, Monday morning, we had a 911 executive committee meeting with the commissioner and all the mayors of all the major 4 cities in the city or in the county. Again, a very good group to get together with. Noblesville High School, and I just found out that this afternoon, won the Innovative Within an entrepreneurial competition on a statewide basis, and they'll share a $100,000 prize package. So congratulations to them. I know Don Rettrick has had an innovative class there and been very successful, and obviously very proud of them. Today we opened up, if you will, officially, if you will, Baby Lamb Memorial at the cemetery, and credit certainly to Evelyn and Jackie, who kind of are clerk, as you know, is in charge of that, but did a great job researching who was there, and then celebrated and a plaque, and the plaque is beautiful. So something, if you're around, you might take a look at the seminary. Also, there was a groundbreaking for the jail expansion today on the jail property. We have a box city, I don't know if you're aware of that, where elementary children kind of take a piece of paper, or actually a whole floor, and create their own city. The planning department does it. It's been very successful for those young people to learn, number one, about government and planning and thinking ahead. That is starting at Our Lady of Grace and hosted by the planning department, as I mentioned. Janus has a fundraiser on the 20th of April. As we all know, Janus is a very great organization that helps those who are challenged. And then Prevail, Fort has an expansion ribbon cutting at the Kenley building where they're expanding into some of the other additional space that they need. And again, Prevail does a great job. Are there any other questions of me or questions of me? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Moving along to council committee reports. Mr. Ayer?
Roads Committee met on April 6th. Present were myself, Mr. Boyce, Mr. Hampton, and Mr. O'Connor. I think Mr. Jensen was maybe out in Washington or some travel. Oh, he's on spring break with his family, which was a good excuse. Items that were on the agenda, Traffic Committee and council items. There's going to be some housekeeping changes that are going to come in front of us regarding some parking requests and street vacation. East-West Corridor Project in Pleasant Street. There were some meetings today, roundtable meetings. We're still working on funding, environmental issues. The route is being worked on, and there'll be another public meeting in the future. Midland Trace Trail, the clearing for Phase 2 between Willowview Road and Hazeldale Road is complete, and earthwork will begin once the ground dries. Sidewalk and resurfacing programs, the project has been out for bid. Work is expected to begin in June, and I believe Mr. Berry in the near future will be sending all of you a list, if you haven't received one yet, of those resurfacing projects. Riverwalk design is complete for the small phase from Division Street to Southside Park. Still doing some permitting and applications with the Department of Natural Resources. Levee Trail plans are being finalized. Little Chicago Road, an MPO grant for $2.7 million has been awarded for 2024 to build a trail from Hawthorne Place to Kerrigan Road. Roy, you'll be very interested to know that we did receive a grant for that bridge. The city will have to fund about $1.5 million of that. Other MPO projects, Greenfield and Howe, most of the parcels have been settled. There's still one piece they're working on. 19th and Pleasant, bids are expected to go out this summer with a fall construction. And Cumberland Road, a final offer has been made on the final parcel construction plan for 2019. There is a State Road 37 public meeting that will be held on April 24th at the Delaware Township Trustee's office. And I don't know what time that is. I'm guessing it'll be on a website somewhere. Logan Street pedestrian bridge, the county is finalizing plans but has encountered a few delays, and I think Mr. Spalding might talk about that here in a little while. And I believe that's all we have.
Any questions for Mr. Ayer, the Roads Committee?
Mr. Ayer, I think that meeting might be 5 to 7, but I would check the website just to be sure.
Further council committee reports, Mr. Taylor?
I've got about 3. Been busy 2 weeks. I'll make them brief. On April 2nd, tree board met. Topics of discussion was spring plantings. We're planning on planting 120 spring trees. Green Vista Landscape was awarded the contract, and you should have received an email with a list of the areas those trees will be planted in. If you didn't, let me know and I'll resend it. The Tree City USA application was sent in. Noblesville's been a Tree City for 28 years, and we're talking about maybe getting some signs for our gateways to let everybody know that we are a Tree City. Arbor Day event, that will be April 28th, and that event will be held at Federal Hill Commons, which is a great spot to have it. And we're still looking at Little Chicago Road between 32 and 38 to do something in the median. And I think the street department is also looking on Little Chicago Road as well. So that will be forthcoming. And then, as you noticed, or as you know, that we no longer have tree bonds. So something we've been trying to work on for the last years is new landscaping for our subdivisions. And that's just where we put our street trees and trying to figure out how we can put street trees that are going to last and get them planted the way they're supposed to be, so in 2 years we're not replacing them and try to solve some of our sidewalk issues. So that will be forthcoming to the administration, and if they approve, we'll bring it to council and see what we can do. The next one was April 3rd, which was our Downtown District Committee. There was 2 presentations. The second one was a presentation of downtown demographic and market analysis. Most of you who were in the room tonight were basically, they said the same thing to us, so I'm not going to go through that. If somebody wants to get with me that needs an update, we'll do that. And then the other presentation was Seminary Park. If you'll remember, in January, we agreed to fund the schematic design in order to determine a budget for Seminary Park. There was a firm hired for that, and it was the, I'll probably pronounce this wrong, the Mater Design. Mater Design noted design service to help accentuate Seminary Park as a gateway to downtown. With that, Mr. Bennett asked for the feedback from the committee to construct the majority of these improvements with a cost approximately of $352,250. Seems like every time we bring this back up, the price goes up. So, he stated for the first phase, it cost approximately $93,750. Mrs. Rowland asked when that timeline could be constructed, and Mr. Bennett replied, if council approves funding, the park could be open around November. I asked the question of, has he got any funding available for that at this time? And he said maybe with park impact fees. I think the next step is probably go to the Finance Committee and the Administration Controller to see how they would like to fund that, if we're going to fund that somehow. And then I guess the next thing is when we have our next Downtown District Committee meeting, that will be one of the topics of discussion. I know at one time, the Downtown Committee was interested in helping fund this when it was $180,000. And the last report we had before this one was $300,000. So as you can see, this price tag just keeps getting higher. So we're going to have to ask the Downtown Committee what they think, if we want to help do that. I think it's a fantastic idea. I don't want to sound negative. I'm just a little shocked at the price. It just keeps going up. I mean, this is a park that's already built. You know, we're trying to enhance it. We're not trying to rebuild it. And then the last one, which was important as well, is downtown parking. By the way, you guys should have a list of the design and the price tag on the park. On March 27th, we had a downtown parking task force committee meeting with the police department, and the police department has researched software and hardware for our meters that are out of date, and most of them don't work anymore. So that was a very good meeting. There was plenty of questions. A few of the questions was payment questions. How are we going to do tickets? Where would the kiosks be placed? And last but not least, the cost. So I know Mrs. Rowland had some concerns, and she sent out to everybody on council. I kind of had a little different approach, and I've sent that out to you too. But there's another meeting on April 13th at 2 o'clock, which is this coming Friday. I would suggest that anybody on this council that can be there really needs to be there, because he presented a really good program, but I just think it's something that we're going to have to decide, and we got to do something. So I'd appreciate most of us being there if we could. And with that, I'll be quiet.
April 13th at
Friday, 2 o'clock.
2 o'clock.
Questions of Mr. Taylor? Thank you for all those reports. Additional council committee reports?
Mr. President,
Mr. O'Connor?
Finance Committee met April 5th. I'll be brief because two of the items we discussed are on our agenda this evening: the appropriation for the city share of the Logan Street pedestrian bridge, and also transfers for the fire department for equipment, which is also on the agenda. We did discuss our annual lease agreement, which is approved by the Board of Works, but Mr. Spalding had gone out to 2 or 3 different vendors. We looked at the different providers, and there weren't material differences, but there were differences. So I think the committee response was to let Mr. Spalding make a decision based on things that would be beneficial for he and his staff from a relationship perspective. So that number was just north of $5 million for equipment for a variety of different departments across the city. We continue to have some items on the agenda that are pending, ordinances that I know Jeff will get to, some different resolutions, so I won't belabor those. Continual work on the chart of accounts. We're looking into fleet management advisory services, which is being handled by Mr. Cook. And let's see, what else did we discuss? That was primarily it. The claims come to you with a favorable recommendation. Ms. Wiles, you think of anything else?
Not at this time.
Okay. So that concludes my report.
Thank you, Mr. O'Connor. Do we have Mr. Taylor?
If I forgot, the questions that were asked, I sent a copy of that to you guys for Mrs. Rowland's comments and mine, if you want to look over that before Friday, so you kind of be up to speed where we're at. Thanks.
With that, we'll take a motion to approve the claims.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor? 9-0. All right, moving right along to previously discussed ordinances. Ordinance 04-03-18, council to consider. Ordinance 04-03-18, an ordinance approving additional appropriations in the cumulative capital development as a CCD fund. Mr. Spalding.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, City Controller, and the ordinance before you is step 2 of the 2-step process for the additional appropriation. It was introduced at the last council meeting, and if you'll recall, the discussion around that was that what this ordinance is doing is really just reinstating the budget for the Cumulative Capital Development Fund in the position that the council adopted it in October of 2017 for this year. And without going through all of the details, we've discussed some of these things in the past. There are certain relatively complex aspects of state law around establishing tax rates, appropriating funds, so on and so forth. And what happened here, despite the council's action and clear desire to appropriate these monies in this way and establish a contingency reserve in the Cumulative Capital Development Fund, the DLGF, through their process and really kind of a technical misunderstanding of the funds available, reduced that appropriation by $938,311. And as a result of that action, the way to correct it is during the budget year, you come back to the council and the council says, yep, we really meant to appropriate that money in that way. And so that's what this ordinance does.
Any questions for Mr. Spalding? With that, we will open the public hearing for ordinance 04-03-18.
Mr. President,
Ms. Wiles?
seeing no one come forward, I move that we close the public hearing.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to close the public hearing for ordinance 04-03-18. All those in favor? 9-0. This will be, can I have a motion to approve ordinance 04-03-18?
Mr. President,
Mr. Ayer?
I move that we approve ordinance 04-03-18.
I'll second that.
It's been moved and seconded. This will be a roll call vote. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll?
Mr. Ayer?
Aye.
Mr. Boyce?
Aye.
Mr. Hampton?
Aye.
Mr. Johnson?
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor?
Aye.
Ms. Rowland? Mr. Taylor?
Aye.
Ms. Wiles?
Aye.
Mr. Jensen?
Aye.
Motion passes 9 votes.
Moving along to proposed development presentation, as mentioned, number 1 has been tabled until May 15th. We'll move on to development presentation number 2. Council to consider introductory information for the proposed SMC of America plan development. Ms. Yelton. Good evening.
Good evening. I'm going to guess I don't have to go into a lot of detail considering the fact that we've had items on this before the council the last couple of meetings. But this project is for the eventual construction of a new building on basically SMC property that is owned by them. And the reason that we are doing this, or we're before the council at this time, is because part of the property that they own is in an existing PD known as the Smithfield Business Park. The Smithfield Business Park doesn't necessarily allow the type of industrial type use that SMC is proposing. So it's kind of a cleanup of a portion of the SMC area. So again, you know, like I said, it's a cleanup of that area of a portion of the the Smithfield Business Park, a modification to some of the underlying standards of what is the corporate campus plan development district. And so ultimately what we're doing or will be doing is creating kind of like an SMC overlay of this area for a portion of their property. We'll eventually be back with other amendments to, I'm going to say, clean up this area, which again is the Smithfield Business Park. This property here is currently owned by SMC also. But that'll be for another day.
Questions of Ms. Yelton? See none. Thank you very much. We'll see you back shortly. Does anyone from SMC would like to speak? Is there any? Come on forth. Sorry, I didn't mean to move on without you, but state your name and address, please. Thank you.
Through this one tonight.
Sorry, everyone's quiet up here. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. Jim Schinover with the law firm of Nelson and Frankenberger, offices at 550 Congressional Boulevard, Suite 210, Carmel, Indiana 46032. Also with me tonight on behalf of the applicant, which is SMC Corporation, is Chad Bossler, Director of Production, as well as R.J. Burton of Victory Unlimited Construction. I will be very brief. Ms. Yelton has described, in essence, what we're trying to seek, and I know there have been other matters on your agenda related to this project. I'm simply putting this exhibit up. We had provided to you council brochures in advance of tonight's meeting. This particular exhibit was included behind tab 3, and sometimes pictures worth 1,000 words. Just as Joyce Ann described, the condition that we're faced with is the yellow perimeter outline is the overall approximately 59 acres that we're dealing with regarding the rezone. And you can see based on the different colors, there's a few different zoning classifications going on. So exactly as Ms. Yelton described, we want to go into a process of amending the underlying PD so that the proposed second building that SMC desires to construct will occur. Also, as she described, we were going to begin a process in meeting with staff over the next few weeks as we kick off this process for this phase. We're also going to start speaking with staff regarding the remaining outlots adjacent to 146th Street and also up here, so that we can then do another amendment to bring that zoning so it's all consistent with the overall project. But with that said, we also included other exhibits within your council introductory brochures that give you a flavor of what we're trying to accomplish. And our next step would be eventually appearing before the Plan Commission, and prior to that conducting a neighborhood meeting with the residents that would be required to receive notice of the Plan Commission meeting. But with that said, if you have any additional questions of us, we'll of course remain to respond to those. Thank you.
Any additional questions, Mr. O'Connor?
Just, Jim, real quickly, where the landscape berm and the detention basin is on the north end, where Lot 3, which I think is the housing facility for trainees that come in, how far is that from the back side of that property line? I'm just curious. Yep.
Yes, so this is the training facility for employees, Lot 3, and this berm area here. I will get a specific question or answer from our engineer. I would estimate that it's probably at least 150 yards.
450 feet, my math's right. Yeah, that was the only question that I had at this point, but I was just curious how far that was, where the building's gonna be. Building height is anticipated, I don't know, is it gonna be similar to what? I can't remember, was it 40? Height, building height,
Yeah, 41.
41?
40 to 41
Okay.
feet. So it'll be very similar to the existing building.
Thanks.
Any additional questions for Jim? Thank you. Sorry for trying to skip over you.
You're fine.
Appreciate
We
it.
appreciate your time tonight.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, moving along to new ordinances for discussion. Ordinance 05-04-18, council to consider ordinance 05-04-18, an ordinance approving additional appropriations in the general fund and establishing a public hearing.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. Mr. Spalding.
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, City Controller, and this is fairly straightforward. It's an additional appropriation ordinance to pay what is the proposed to be the city's share of improvements to the Logan Street Bridge, creating a pedestrian bridge alongside the regular transportation bridge. That bridge will be built by the county. It will be actually owned by the county, and the city's contributing to that. So this money is being appropriated as such as a public purpose grant from the city to the county. So that's why it's appropriated in the 300 series. And any questions you might have about the bridge project itself, the timing of the project, the costs, those types of things, John Berry is here to answer those questions because I know a little bit about them but don't have the depth of expertise. But what this does is establishes the funding for the city's portion of that project cost.
I have a question, and it might be for Mr. Beery, but do we have we established an MOU with the county in regards to this project? Did we sign an MOU?
We're working on one right now, first
Okay, just curious.
He just gave you the thumbs up.
The attorney just, as the attorney exits, he gave me a thumbs up. I was just curious. I just think that's probably important to outline the funding on that, so, thank you. Additional questions for Mr. Spalding or Mr. Beery or Mr. Cook on the project? Timeline? A year from now, okay. It'll be a good asset, I think, to downtown, to allow the walkability. Yeah. Okay, with that, we need to establish a public hearing for ordinance 05-04-18. Make a motion to do that?
So moved.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded. All those in favor to establish the public hearing, raise your right hand. 9-0. Thank you very much. See you back in a couple weeks for that. Moving on to new ordinance for discussion, ordinance 06-04-18. Council to consider ordinance 06-04-18, an ordinance regarding text amendments to ordinance 19-03-15 for the Marion Planned Development.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
It's been motioned and seconded to introduce. Ms. Asherman, good evening.
Good evening. Because I will forget, I just want to remind you, the petitioner has requested a combined second and third reading for this item tonight, so that is something for you to consider. The petitioner is requesting an amendment to the original Marion Plan Development, which was done in 2016, 2015. That original plan development actually required basements in all 115 homes in the neighborhood, and they needed to be a minimum size of 1,275 square feet. The petitioner's request tonight is to amend that text to allow 21 homes within the neighborhood to have no basement. They could be constructed on a crawl or a slab, and that the minimum basement size be amended to be reduced from 1,275 square feet to 1,000 square feet. They do have an agreement in place with Sagamore, and I apologize, I actually didn't print out the graphic. There are homes adjacent to Sagamore. Anything with an X would actually have to follow the agreement of the original PD. There are actually 3 or 4 homes that are currently constructed already here, and they're just getting ready to open up Section 2, which is down here. So a majority of the homes that would be affected are actually in a future Section 3. But the Sagamore is here, and they have been negotiating with an attorney in Sagamore representing one of the property owners that was organizing things. But they have reached an agreement, and the Plan Commission forwarded to you with a favorable recommendation that we allow up to 94 homes with a 1,000 square foot basement, and the remaining 21 could be on a crawl or a slab, and that the 22 homes adjacent to Sagamore would have a basement totaling at least 1,000 square feet. Minimum house size for a single-story house would be 1,900 square feet, which is up from the 1,700 square feet that the PD currently allows, and that any 1.5-story homes would have a minimum 1,700 square foot first floor and a total square footage of 2,000 square feet.
Questions of staff? Ms. Wiles?
You mentioned that there's an agreement with homeowners in Sagamore, but
The,
yet we haven't seen that.
so they just in writing agreed through email to staff that they agreed to the proposed changes to the text amendment. It's a little unusual in terms of agreements that we normally see, but I do have confirmation from Mr. Zubek, who is the attorney representing the homeowner, that he agreed to the changes in the marked up ordinance that was submitted by the petitioner. And they did not show up for the second Plan Commission meeting in March. It was continued in January. They used the month of February to negotiate back and forth. And the week before the Plan Commission meeting in March, I got confirmation from Mr. Zubek that he agreed to the changes proposed by Mr. Gradison. And they basically stopped remonstrating.
Taylor?
So, when this was approved, all of them had to have basements?
Yes, a 1,275 square foot basement. Now, it just said basement, and my understanding is there's actually only one finished basement in the neighborhood. The rest are all unfinished. And the primary, their primary market is a lot of empty nesters and snowbirds. So they've had a lot of feedback from customers coming in that they don't want the burden of the basement possibly flooding when they're gone for a couple of months in the winter. So they wanted the option of just having a slab or a crawl.
I guess my next question is this a different edition? I think he's been in front of us before. Was that a different edition?
Yes, it was. So that was actually off of Gray Road, and it was Holston Hills.
Okay.
Both subdivisions came in really close together originally. Ryan originally was supposed to be the builder in both of them. At the time they started site development, Ryan chose to only develop in the Holston Hills subdivision off of Gray Road. Mr. Gradison then went out, and MI is developing in this. There's radical differences between the two product types, but Ryan asked for the same amendment 6 months ago.
Other questions of staff, Mr. Ayer?
Questions, comment. I have a concern with passing changes that are being made in a subdivision in the middle of the game. You have existing homeowners. I have on first reading, I should say, passing on first reading. You have existing homeowners, adjoining homeowners, and I think that the affected after this meeting by people that have a concern, And so that's, I do have a concern with the passing on. I also have a concern that we just continuously get these changes brought to us. And, you know, we work, I think the developer, the planning staff, the planning commission, and council works hard to get a product that'll pass. And then all of a sudden, boom, they're back in front of us. And it's just a concern I have.
Commissioners to speak first. Any other comments or questions for Ms. Ashelman?
Would echo Mr. Ayers' comments.
Nice way put.
Mr. Radisson, would you like to speak?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the council. Mark Radisson, Grass and Land Development, offices at 6330 75th Street, Suite 156, Indianapolis, Indiana. Thanks for your time this evening, and I guess I will start off by saying I understand the sentiment, and you perhaps do not want to vote this evening. My thought pattern was this, for good or for bad, was something that had been discussed, and I didn't feel we would have any remonstration here this evening, and felt that we had worked through the details, and I was merely just trying to be concise in our time in front of you guys as council, and you guys are very busy. So with that said, as Mrs. Ashelman depicted to you, we have in both our Holston Hills development, that is Ryan Homes, as well as now in Marion, we have found in this empty nester market a strong sentiment out there that some folks do not want to have a basement. As she stated, concerns of sump pump failure, or they would rather spend that money in other parts of the house instead of being mandated to build a basement that they may or may not ever use. And so that's the gist of this part of things. As in 2015, as we went through the PUD process originally, we had lots of discussions with folks at Sagamore, and Mr. Zubak ended up representing the folks during that time frame. We worked to a deal that included 1,275 square feet in the basement, and all homes would have a basement of at least that size. As Ms. Ashelman suggested or discussed with you prior, Ryan Homes was our builder at that point in time. Ryan had homes that had partial basements that would meet that 1,275 square foot level. So that was an appropriate level for us. MI Homes, who is currently our builder now, and will hope to build all 115 units on site, they do not have homes that have partial basements at that 1,275 square foot level. Their homes have 4 of the 5 products being offered currently have basements that are 1,000 square, or partial basements that are 1,000 square foot. So we asked for that number in lieu of the 1,275 across the development in order to still have that basement in there, but have it just be a touch smaller since it's unfinished in most cases, as there is only one that has been finished so far, plus the model. That it's just a small amount of difference from 1,275 to 1,000 square foot from a value perspective. And that was where Mr. Zubak and his clients were coming from as we talked through the last 3 months, was making sure that if we decided, if you would allow us to have the slab or crawl homes across the development, 21 of them, that we would be able to then show some value in those homes up above where we started with the original amendment, or sorry, excuse me, up above the original PUD that we had approved in 2015. So things like the square footage of the home to be 2,000 square feet versus 1,700. Obviously 300 square feet additional in that area is a large number, probably about the same price as what an unfinished basement would be. We also made sure that we had other additions to the, we ended up with 1,900 square feet on the 22 homes that were adjacent to Sagamore, in addition to the 2,000 square feet that we had on the other homes that were on slab. So we've made some concessions in order to keep the values up, as was their concerns, and we hope you understand that. And we did work diligently for the last 3 months on this to be able to get the neighbors at Sagamore happy with the prospect of this text amendment.
Great, thank you, Mr. Grasson. I would, before you ask any questions, I would just say that it takes unanimous consent of the council in order to waive the rules and pass on first reading. I don't think you'll have that unanimous consent, so we'll just pass on that. I would just like to echo what Mr. Ayers said. I know I sound like a broken record on this topic because I think I'm the only one that voted against the Holston Hills change with the slabs, but I personally am not comfortable with changing a PD midstream. So I think we need to take a look at how we handle these going forward in case we have more. So that's just my comments going forward. But does anyone else have questions or comments for Mr. Gradison?
I do, Mr. President.
Mr. Hampton?
Just on the 21 additional slabs, what is the plan as far as timetable? Would those just be sold and built if they're requested first, or is there a plan on how you would phase those in? Or
Well, as per the plan that got it here. Oh, my screen won't work. Sorry. I didn't. So, Section 1 is currently constructed to this point, and then Section 2 is this area. So currently, there would then be, we have roughly 35 lots on the ground currently that are not sold to MI. MI has some inventory of lots as well, so let's call it 40 lots. In this first section, or first two sections, there are 7 lots that are available for slab construction, is all in this first 40 lots. As we move this way, we would then have another 14 lots in sections 3 and 4 that would be available for construction of slab homes or crawl space homes, either or. So timetable is partly based upon the development, but also based upon demand. And that is the idea here, is that we're trying to allow the customer to have some choice in where they would like to spend their money. So it depends on when they show up.
okay, thank you.
Yes.
On this illustration, all the lots marked with an X will have a basement.
Correct. So that those lots with the X match up with the 22 lots. Let me make sure I got the nomenclature right. The 22 lots that must have a basement of at least 1,000 feet, and then an upgrade of at least 1,900 square feet, a 200 square foot additional minimum compared to the 1,700 square feet that's in the PUD.
Additional questions from Mr. Gradison?
Mr. President.
Mr. Johnson?
I guess I just have a question, and maybe it's for us in the city, is as you do get out of that child-rearing age, you kind of don't want basements because most of them seem to leak in some fashion or another. And I guess I'm wondering why we're requiring them. Just a thought, I guess.
Do we want to answer that, Ms. Asherman?
I think that's what they brought to us.
Suzanne and I were having a quick consultation on the side. We believe Holston Hills and Marion are the only 2 PDs that in their PD they require the basements. This was another planner that's no longer on staff's project to begin with, but I suspect the basement requirement was a concession to try to quiet some of the remonstrance from Sagamore. But Holston Hills and Marion, we believe, are the only 2 subdivisions we have that require basements in the text of the PD. And we've talked internally, it's not really a function of zoning to dictate the use of space, whether it's to require a basement or to require additional square footage. What we do a lot of times, one of the things we work through while trying to come to a compromise was, do you require a morning room or the 1.5-story bonus room or a bump out on the dining room to make up for the square footage? And the choice seemed to be, that everyone agreed with, was to bump up the minimum square footage requirements if they went to a slab, and let them decide whether they were going to do that through the addition of a morning room or a sunroom or the 1.5-story bonus room.
I mean, I don't know, the basements, unless they're walkout or something like that, they don't count toward the square footage of the home anyway.
If they are finished, they do, and they are assessed.
I believe, isn't it only if they're finished and they have to have egress windows or doors?
Because I don't assess houses, I don't know the answer to that totally, but I have seen they will list building square footages or basement square footages on, property cards.
I've never in the sale of a house been able to count a basement that didn't have an egress window.
You
State
are
by state,
correct.
or do we know?
I don't know whether it varies state by state, but I think you can't count a bedroom that doesn't have an egress window as a bedroom.
You gotta have a window big enough to get out.
For a basement.
For a bedroom. Whether it's varies state, whether it varies here, I can't answer. I know it's listed when we see it as partial finished basement, what percentage of it's finished.
I do know that
not.
county, if you have a finished basement, they're gonna charge you the assessed value, regardless of whether there's an egress window, and they get copies of all our, permits internally so that they can assess them.
I've never been able to count the basement as part of the square footage unless there was egress in some manner. And I've had several finished basements that did not have egress windows, and we could not count that as part of our square footage when we went to sell the house.
Any other questions of Mr. Grattison or staff? All right, well, we'll see you in a couple weeks. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Moving on to ordinance 07-04-18, council to consider ordinance 07-04-18, an ordinance regarding text amendments and preliminary development plan update for the Meredith Meadows planned development. Ms. Yelton, good evening.
Good evening again.
Sorry, hold on.
Motion to introduce.
Second.
Motion. It's been motioned and introduced and seconded. Thank you very much.
The proposal this evening is to update an existing preliminary development plan in the ordinance for the overall Meredith Meadows plan development, which is located south of Greenfield Avenue and east of Union Chapel Road, and it is in regards, in particular, to the commercial portion of that development. Basically, the 4 items that are being modified will include modifications to the existing preliminary development plan. Basically, on the left here, you see what was adopted back in 2017. The proposal is what is over on the right, and is a part of this current ordinance. They are also updating their architectural elevations. This is just an example of some of the buildings that would be in this particular PD. This is a picture of the inline building that has several tenants in it. And this, again, is the many storage warehouse units that will be located basically on the eastern portion of this property. The other item that they would be addressing is they are allowed to have a drive-through window. The problem is the drive-through window cannot face an arterial roadway, basically, so it can't face Greenfield Avenue and it couldn't face Union Chapel. So they have asked to amend that to allow a drive-through window. When we were here at council meeting for introduction, council wanted something basically to dress up that window. So in other words, they didn't want to view it from Union Chapel, so they have provided additional landscaping in this area. This would be the actual location of that drive-through window, where you see the taller, I don't know, they could be arborvitae, they could be some other type of a evergreen. And the last item that they would be amending or asking to amend would be the reduction of the retail office building size from 10,000 square feet to 7,000 square feet. The Plan Commission did have a public hearing on this item, and it was forwarded to the council with a favorable recommendation by 11 yea, 0 nay vote. And with that, I will ask if you have any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Yelton? Thank you very much.
Well, wait a minute, do you
No,
not want to hear a presentation
I'm
from the
sorry, I do.
petitioner?
I just keep wanting to skip over that. I apologize. There's no questions. I assume we're all just, sorry. The petitioner like to speak?
Yeah.
See, I knew.
Nope,
I knew
absolutely.
in advance. I knew you didn't want to talk about it. Yeah. Thank you. I apologize for not giving you the opportunity.
That's classic.
All right.
I could only screw it up.
No kidding. Moving on. Ordinance 08-04-18, council to consider ordinance 08-04-18, an ordinance approving additional appropriations for certain park improvements.
Motion to introduce?
Second.
Boom. Mr. Howard.
Those certain park improvements are at Finch Creek. If you recall, the council earlier, upon recommendation of your finance committee, approved the issuance of a bond in the amount of $10.5 million, and the balance of the project would come from existing funds. This ordinance is before you. It essentially is your appropriation into a segregated fund of the amounts listed in paragraph 2, part $502,088 from the Parks Capital Fund, which is already in their budget or in their funds, an amount of park impact fees in the amount of $1,595,506, and also from their PILOS funds, which are the payments in lieu of open space. If you remember, we passed an ordinance for that 3 or 4 years ago. So the developer there gets a little more open space and pays a fee. And the amount in that account that must be used for Finch Creek, and the extra money collected in the future will be for phase 2 or whatever. And that amount is $134,963. This is an additional appropriation, which does not need suspension of the rules. It can be passed on the date of introduction as a matter of law, and it is before you as an item of public hearing.
Any questions of Mr. Howard? Seeing none, we can move to open the public hearing for ordinance 08-04-18.
So moved?
Second.
Yeah, I just opened it.
Snoop. Sorry.
Oh, calm down.
Mr. President,
Mr. Taylor.
seeing nobody coming forward, I would recommend we close the public hearing for ordinance 08-04-18.
So moved.
Moved and seconded to close the public hearing for ordinance 08-04-18.
Megan seconded.
Ms. Wiles seconded.
Closing the public hearing.
Oh, all those in favor of closing the public hearing? Mr. Boyce, thank you. 9-0.
It's ready for vote.
All right.
Or appropriations are only one, they're exception to the rules on.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve then ordinance 08-04-18?
So moved?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Would you like
Mr.
discussion,
President, I have a
Mr.
little
Boyce?
discussion, please.
Yes.
I'm all for the Finch Creek, but I do have to agree with what Rick said earlier in his previous. It seems like if it has to do with our Parks Department, every single week it just keeps getting more and more and more expensive, and we keep hearing more, and we cannot live within our budgets. And I definitely want to see this park get started, but it is very frustrating when I feel like we continually give a department a budget and say live within these means, and I cannot remember one time in my 10 years on the council that budget has been lived within. It seems like every single time it comes and grows, and that's true with every park that I know of that we've done, and it's frustrating. I mean, why do we even give a budget if we're not going to live within it? And I don't see the other departments doing it, and I really like our department. I really like Mr. Bennett. I mean, he's a great guy. I think he's a great park director, but it just is something that I see as a continual problem.
Of course, I would agree with your comments. I think that we've had several frustrations over the past 6 months when it comes to this department. I think parks are incredibly important. I'm glad to see Finch Creek move forward, but I do think we need to double down on our efforts to, you know, tighten our belt as much as possible going forward as we provide this amenity to the people of Noblesville. So, any other comments, Ms. Wiles?
Yeah, Mr. President, one of the challenges with this site has been, especially the utility relocation, and that is added to the budget. And this is a project that we've talked about for quite a while, and that was already in the budget. I think we've just now gotten to the point of appropriating the funds for this project. So I don't know that they've blown the budget so far in this first phase. I do know that the utility cost was more than we had anticipated, which we have no control over. But we do want to be able to relocate those poles for the ingress.
This appropriation is consistent with the budget that this council talked with Mr. Bennett and approved 2 months ago. And the project is on the street to be bid within this budget. So I told Mr. Bennett I didn't think we'd have a problem since you'd already approved this budget, but the maximum budget was set at a little over $10 million, and you add this money, that's right where it is. I agree with Councilman Wiles. Because so much of this investment is below ground, we're going to go, what did we get for our money? Well, what we got is a foundation to build the rest of the down the road. So, but I agree that since this project was first envisioned 2 years ago, Mr. Boyce, it has gone up. But this is consistent with the instructions that the development team was given 2 months ago.
And if I may just comment, I think, and I don't want to speak for Mr. Boyce, but I think my comments were more just a matter of principle of the whole department and all the projects going forward. So
thank you.
That was my comment. So, Mr. Ayer.
Well, we can go back 5 years, and Ms. Langley said we'd do this whole park for $13 million, the whole park. So,
yeah.
I guess I thought that we were at a $7.5 million bond and a $7.5 million budget. But that's my fault for not being in the February meeting. So let's put that all aside. I think what I'm hearing and gathering is that, and I know administration is soon to be bringing us a capital improvements plan, and we've done a lot with trails and we've done a lot with parks, but we have a lot of other departments and a lot of other needs that our city needs, and I think administration is going to address that in that capital improvements plan, and we're probably going to have to maybe put phase 2 of Finch Creek off a little longer in order to accomplish some of these other things we're going to need to get done. What I'm gathering, or hearing anyway.
President, and also,
Hampton.
I guess in fairness to Mr. Bennett, at the Finance Committee, before he presented this budget to this council, he actually went in and took a few little pieces and parts out of the plan, things like a restroom near the trail and lights on the pickleball field to try to save money on courts, pickleball courts. And truthfully, as a finance committee, if you guys remember, we said, you know, if we're going to build this thing, if we're going to spend this kind of money, we can't skimp on some of these small things like lights on a pickleball field and a bathroom for people that are walking on the trail. So we had him actually put that back in, and that raised it slightly. It wasn't a lot in relation to $10 million. But I think all of us, if you're going to build something, you want to make it as good as you can make it. It needs to be an amenity that lasts for 100 years, and it is a special cornerstone of Noblesville. And I think, so I'll give some credit to Mr. Bennett in the sense that he was trying to pull some strings and get some things done, and truthfully, the Finance Committee didn't let him do that.
And that budget did go up and down because I was trying to get a number so I could start the financing, because they were going up and down, but they wanted to start construction in April, and that can't print money that fast.
Yeah. Any other, Mr. Ayer?
I think Mr. Taylor had something. Just real quick to clarify, since this $10.5 million keeps getting thrown around, a little over 2.2 million of that is coming from existing cash and existing resources. So
that's what I was thinking, the $7.5 million bond.
Right,
And that's what it is.
Where my confusion
and that includes issuance costs.
Gotcha.
So that's all the money we're printing in May.
makes a big difference from 7.5 to 10.
Yeah, I agree.
That's cash we already have.
But I still echo that we've got to get parks under control. I mean, there's other departments in this city that need stuff, and they seem to get pushed on the back burner. And everybody else comes within budget most of the time.
Well, I'll bring Mr. Bennett back. We're going to have the motion to approve the final bond ordinance here in about 4 weeks. And you can share your comments with him. He wanted to know if he should come this evening. I said, well, this amount's already approved, so.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments? It's been motioned and seconded. Clerk will call the roll.
Mr. Ayers.
Aye.
Mr. Boyce.
Aye.
Mr. Hampton.
Aye.
Mr. Johnson.
Aye.
Mr. O'Connor.
Aye.
Ms. Rowland. Mr. Taylor.
Aye.
Ms. Wiles.
Aye.
Mr. Jensen.
Aye.
9-0, the ordinance is approved.
Thank you, Mr. Howard.
Thank you.
Sorry to make you work
Thank
for it
you.
before vacation. So, all right. Moving on. Transfer number 1. Council to consider a transfer in the fire department budget. Mr. Spalding.
Mr. President, members of the council, Jeff Spalding, City Controller, and this transfer resolution is, I suppose, in a way, a companion to the previous fiscal action related to the Cumulative Capital Development Fund. And the relationship is this: that initial or previous additional appropriation reestablishes the appropriations in the fund the way the council adopted the budget. Then what this transfer is doing is taking those appropriations and realigning them to reflect the way we actually plan to spend the money as a result of kind of a change in approach since the budget was adopted. So this will be something, these types of transfer resolutions you may see a little bit more often now with me, because I'm going to have proper accounting drive the budget as opposed to having the way things were budgeted drive the way that we account for them. And so what's going on here, the reason for this transfer is I've since made some decisions working with departments on the items, the capital equipment items they want to purchase, and which items would be purchased with cash and which would be financed over a period of years. And so as a result, there were some items that were, when they prepared their budget, they presumed that they would be financed through the capital equipment lease, but I didn't think they were really good candidates for that type of financing. And I can give you some examples here if you'd like. And then the other thing that's going on is there were a couple major pieces of equipment for the fire department that at a previous time had been contemplated to be funded out of the corporate campus east, I think, or corporate campus west. I can't remember which one, but out of a TIF district. And the fire chief came to me and said he was fine with that, but he would prefer that those items not be tethered in any way to one specific area of the city. Not that that would cause him any major problems, but if he could avoid it, he'd prefer to avoid it. So with those two decisions, I made the decision to not fund that capital equipment purchase out of that source and fund it out of the Cumulative Capital Development Fund. All those things together will require a realignment of the money in that fund from non-departmental down into the fire department's budget in these amounts, but it's a budget neutral transfer. It's not increasing the appropriations to the fund. It's just taking some of the funds from the contingency, moving them down into the fire budget and aligning them between the 300 series where you pay lease payments and the 400 series where you make cash payments. Doing all of those things together, I know that's kind of hideously complicated, but that's what this is doing. So it's taking money that's been budgeted, realigning it to match the way we plan to spend it.
Mr. Spalding, any questions for Mr. Spalding on transfer number 1? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve transfer number 1?
I'll make the motion to approve transfer number 1.
Second?
Been moved and seconded. All those in favor? 9-0. Thank you very much. Moving right along to council comments. Mr. Ayer.
Mr. Schwartz left. He was here, and I was hoping he
Yes.
brought us a check. But apparently, as he handed it to the mayor, apparently he didn't, so. I was hoping he did bring us one, but anyway, I'd like to give a brief discussion. Tonight, we all attended the streets, or almost all of us attended the streetscape study proposal, public input proposal. I hate to call it the perfect storm, but we have a lot of departments, administration, planning, engineering, all working on a lot of things that are going to not necessarily change the scope of our city and or change our historic downtown or community, but enhance it. You have the parking task force has worked hard for 3 years. They're going to have some recommendations come in front of us. The downtown streetscape plan is not going to come cheap, and Seminary Park has been, as Rick has touched on, is not going to be an inexpensive project. We have the Pleasant Street extension going on. There's just a huge amount of synergy going on in this building right now and in the community. I look forward to the mayor bringing us a capital improvements plan that'll help make all this work, and we can get some of these things moving forward, but they're not going to be inexpensive.
Mr. Ayer, any additional comments? I will just make one. I had a note in my mailbox today from the Hamilton County Health Department. They'll be doing, in conjunction with the Indiana Immunization Coalition, they're hosting a screening of Someone You Love, the HPV epidemic, on April 25th this year at the high school from 6 to 8 p.m. It's award-winning documentary looks at the lives of 5 brave women affected by HPV. One of those women, Kristen Forbes, graduated from Noblesville High School in 2003 and will be featured in this documentary. I graduated with Kristen a year before her, but I encourage you, if you have time on the 25th, from 6 to 8 to join some of our folks within the community at the high school for the screening of this film. Any other comments? Seeing none, is there a motion to adjourn? So moved. Second. All those in favor? Good evening. Thank you.